Reviews: Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Episode 6 Review. Lift us where suffering cannot reach. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds sees Pike reunite with an old flame and undertake a mission where succeeding looks an awful lot like failure in the end. This Star Trek: Strange New Worlds review contains spoilers. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Episode 6. One of the best things about Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is the way that it completely blows apart the idea that week-to-week episodic television can't be as deep, nuanced, or emotionally impactful as more serialized stories with season-long arcs. In fact, I'd argue that even though Strange New Worlds has self-contained adventures that take place in each episode, it is also telling plenty of meaningful, long-term character stories at the same time. The biggest and most obvious is the fate of Captain Christopher Pike, whose radiation disfigurement and paralysis won't even occur for another decade, but still colors his day-to-day life thanks to the vision he saw of his own future. Deciding who he'll be in the face of that foreknowledge is now, essentially, Pike's life's work, and Strange New Worlds will have to figure out how to tell stories about his character that reflect that inner struggle without getting either repetitive or overly saccharine about it. Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach is the first predominantly Pike-focused episode since the series pilot, and is an hour that sees the captain not only truly fail for the first time, but face a serious and shocking betrayal from someone he clearly once cared deeply for. The hour also deftly reinforces why Pike is always going to be doomed and reminds us, as viewers, why we shouldn't wish him otherwise, as much as we may hate it at times. Because even if Pike's future somehow isn't written in stone, it is irrevocably tied to who he is, and the man he is will never put his own life ahead of those in his care. Next 360p 720 PhD 1080 PhD Auto 360p About cdehjnvbn v1769222 Video Settings Auto About cdehjnvbn v1769222 Null. This episode sees the Enterprise embark on a cartography mission to the Mulholland System, a star cluster on the edge of Federation space that Pike himself once visited a decade earlier as part of a rescue attempt. But when the crew answers a distress call from a Mulholland ship under attack, he's reunited with an old flame and his crew finds themselves charged with protecting an important child from a kidnapping plot. Though the Mulhollands were offered Federation membership, they declined it, preferring to keep their own customs and ways private. It turns out there's a really obvious reason they might want to do this. But I guess then Lieutenant Pike was too busy falling for the pretty young girl named Allura to ask a lot of questions about how her society was structured and or what weird sacrifice-based rituals they might have. Allura, now a Mulholland leader in her own right, oversees a being known as the First Servant, a holy child chosen by lottery to embody the maxim of their people: science, service, sacrifice. Though no one is ever too specific about what exactly any of that means. According to the Mulhollands, the First Servant's imminent ascension will usher in a new era for their planet and allow them to continue to live the way they do, complete with luxury floating cities and highly advanced medicine. Given the constant googly eyes she and Pike make at each other whenever they're in the same room, it's clear he's not super interested in what any of this really involves on a larger cultural scale. It's amazing it takes the two until the episode's midpoint to hook up. After all, a Starfleet captain falling for a pretty if slightly manipulative alien lady is a common enough tale in the Star Trek universe. The addition of a pre-existing love connection between them makes this a little sweeter and generally less uncomfortable than some of the original series relationships we see Captain Kirk engage in, and is, on the whole, less life-changing than the official synopsis of this episode might have had some viewers believe. Yet, Allura's presence isn't really about their romantic relationship, however you choose to define it, or about simply providing a reason for Anson Mount to take his shirt off. It's actually another surprisingly powerful window into Pike's emotional journey, and the weight of the secrets he carries. The bulk of the episode involves a complicated plot in which the Enterprise crew is charged with helping keep the First Servant alive until his ascension day. And though the episode drags out some of its more obvious revelations, of course, it wasn't actually strangers trying to kidnap him, and Allura was lying about something. The twisty plot is full of tension and genuine stakes. I'm sure no one was surprised when it turned out that the Enterprise didn't really accidentally kill her child. But I also doubt anyone expected that lift us where suffering cannot reach would turn around and sacrifice the boy almost immediately anyway, as the First Servant's body is literally turned into the battery which powers the bulk of Mulholland technology. Read more. TV Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Episode 6 Easter Eggs and References. TV Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Episode 5 Review, Spock Amok. To be fair, this is pretty grim storytelling for a Star Trek series, but perhaps a necessary reality check after this first run of Strange New Worlds episodes, which generally involved happy endings, daring escapes, and hijinks all around. Not every story can end well, and not every alien race will be good, at least not in the way that we understand the concept. The fact that Pike, who so desperately wants to do something to help upend a civilization that literally powers itself with the lives of children, has no jurisdiction to do anything at all, is frustrating in a way that feels almost painfully realistic. And, not for nothing, but Alora's insistence that our human society simply doesn't want to look at the sins it regularly perpetrates against its weakest members is, well, not entirely wrong. Perhaps Pike's constant desire to tell all and sundry about his presumably secret destiny of suffering and physical agony reflects his need to believe in the possibility of changing it, i.e., if he tells enough people about the future he saw, it will force that future to change somehow, or if he tells the right person, he'll find the one that can fix it. But the fact that the first non-Starfleet-affiliated person he tells turns out to be the leader of a culture that powers its own comfort through child sacrifice basically affirms why Pike, perhaps the brightest, most empathetic figure in the Star Trek canon at the moment, is never going to turn away from the future he saw on Boreth. No matter how much some of us might wish he would. Pike is not the kind of man who would ever trade innocent lives for his own, or ask someone else to bear the weight of the choices he makes. It breaks my heart because I adore this character and he deserves a better future than the one this universe keeps telling us is waiting for him. But it also means that, when it matters, Pike will choose the right thing, simply because he is not willing to sacrifice others for his own gain. It's what makes him such a great leader, and it's what makes his fate such a tragedy. I know a lot of Star Trek fans out there probably also watch Doctor Who. So I suspect you will understand all this no matter how poorly I draw the comparison. I don't know if having a captain is a thing in this fandom the way having a doctor is there. Mine is 9, for the record. But if it is, Pike is certainly mine, and it's episodes like this that remind me of why. Written by Lacey Bauer. Lacey Bauer is a digital producer by day, but a television enthusiast pretty much all the time. Her writing has been featured in Paste Magazine, Collider. Read more from Lacey Bauer.
Ready to give you another one. I gave you a half.
Features: Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Episode 6 Easter eggs and references. Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach is a dark, strange new worlds morality tale that leaves no stone unturned for bigger references to the rest of Star Trek. This Star Trek: Strange New Worlds article contains spoilers. Although The Next Generation isn't overtly referenced in the 6th episode of Strange New Worlds, the feeling of TNG is keenly felt in this outing for Pike and the crew. In the episode, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach, the Enterprise encounters a culture that seems perfect, which of course means there's some terrible dark secret. If you re-watch the episode, you'll realize the writing is on the wall pretty early on. We're just too charmed by Alora and the first servant to see it at first. But as this sad mystery unfolds, along the way, Strange New Worlds tips its hat more than once to various Star Trek stories of the past. Here are all the Easter eggs and references we caught in Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Next, about Conatix V176922 video settings. Auto about Conatix V176922 null. Last here 10 years ago. Pike's log entry mentions that he was last in this star cluster 10 years ago. This would put the incident in which he rescued Alora from a pulsar in the year 2249. According to Pike's service record, briefly glimpsed in the Discovery episode, Brother Pike became captain of the Enterprise in 2250, a year later. Lieutenant Pike. Alora refers to Pike by the rank he held when she first met him. If it was 2249, this would mean that Lt. Pike was Captain Robert April's first officer. Something interesting to note here is that Pike introduces Una as Lieutenant Commander Una Chin Riley. Although most people call her Number 1, it's possible that some might call her Lt. Chin Riley, making it sound like her rank is a little lower than it actually is. So, in 2249, was Pike Lieutenant Commander Pike, or just Lieutenant Pike? In the original series, Spock was the first officer of the USS Enterprise, and, like Una in Strange New Worlds, also held the rank of Lieutenant Commander. Pike's uniform. Questions about Pike's rank and position get even deeper. Alora mentions that Pike's uniform is very yellow, and he corrects her by saying it's gold. This is a small Easter egg that references two things. First, the actual color of Kirk's uniform in the original series was closer to green, but in the first season, it didn't show up that way on camera. Second, in the Deep Space Nine episode, Trials and Tribulations, Sisko mentions that in the 23rd century Command wore gold. Interestingly, Alora's comments that Pike is wearing yellow could either mean that in 2249 Pike was wearing a different division color, implying he was wearing Operations Red or something, or that in 2249, most of the crew of April's Enterprise was rocking the all-blue Discovery-era uniform. We haven't seen a flashback to Robert April, Adrian Holmes, on the Enterprise yet, but it feels more likely the crew would be wearing the Discovery uniforms, rather than the modified DOS uniforms we saw later in Discovery, or what they're wearing now. In the Short Treks episode The Brightest Star, set in the year 2239, Lieutenant Philippa Georgiou is wearing the blue Discovery-era uniform. Was the Enterprise crew wearing that uniform 10 years later? Rigelian tiger. Pikanu here talk about Lawton's references to a Rigelian tiger. There are a lot of planets called Rigel in Star Trek canon, perhaps most notably, Rigel 2. The location of the original series episode, Shore Leave. In that episode, a tiger does attack several crew members, however, it is a robot tiger created from telepathic suggestions. Laron probably isn't talking about that exact tiger, simply because that story is in Star Trek's future at this point. Grappler. The attack ship trying to snag the shuttle doesn't use a tractor beam, but instead, shoots off some metal cables. This might seem weird in a Star Trek context, but this comes from canon established in Enterprise. In the 22nd century, before the tractor beam became common, the NX-01 Enterprise used a grappler to tow objects. So, this technology isn't wrong, it's simply old. Klingon ships have a scuttle system. Laron tells Uhura that some Klingon ships have a scuttle system. Scuttle is a naval term that refers to destroying or sinking a ship on purpose. The idea that Klingons would rather have their ship destroyed than be captured totally checks out. Get the best of Den of Geek delivered right to your inbox. It's not set to stun. Pike warns the fleeing guard that his phaser is not set to stun. In an earlier scene, we saw Pike activate his phaser briefly. The sound effect used is the same phaser activating sound effect established in Discovery. Pike's flying tackle, Kirk style. When Pike tries to stop the rogue guard, he uses a flying tackle. This is a very Captain Kirk-esque move, which was famously used in both Space Seed and the Gamesters of Triskelion. Sam Kirk, conflict-averse. The idea that Sam Kirk, the brother of James T. Kirk, is conflict-averse is just hilarious. Rare to know what's in your future. Pike reveals to Elora that he knows the details of what happens to him in the TOS episode, The Menagerie. He also, once again, refers to the incident as happening in 10 years. This is very interesting considering that we currently think of The Menagerie as occurring in 2267, which would put it 8 years after the events of Strange New Worlds. Because we don't know exactly what time of year the menagerie occurs, there's some wiggle room here. On top of this, it is possible that the menagerie happens later in the original series than we thought. Not all the episodes of TOS are shown in the order in which they occurred, so it's possible that the menagerie actually happens in 2269, and we just never knew that before now. Still, this slight difference in years does make a hardcore fan wonder, could there be a wrinkle with Pike's vision? Will it occur earlier than he believes but right on time for us? Beaming off the transporter pad. When the first servant gets beamed off, he's beamed off the transporter pad by someone else. This happens a lot in Star Trek canon, starting with the cage in which number 1 and Yeoman Colt are transported off the pad by the Telosians. Mugadin breeding stones. When Ron talks about teaching cadets to leave no stone unturned, she mentions Mugadin breeding stones. This references the Mugato, the horned ape first seen in the TOS episode, A Private Little War. More recently, we saw some Mugatos, breeding in the Lower Decks episode, Mugato, Gumato. Elora confronts Pike about the Federation. At the end of the episode, we learn that on Mayalish one child is sacrificed to uphold the entirety of the culture. The tech here isn't made entirely clear, but aspects of it are similar to the way Spock's brain was used to run an entire planet in the episode Spock's Brain. Obviously, the tone of this episode is much more serious and hits upon a strange paradox about the Federation. We know Mahalsis isn't a Federation world, which means Pike cannot legally do anything to stop them from using the first servant as a human sacrifice to their weird tech god. But what's even more interesting is the fact that Allura points out that suffering does exist in the Federation. She also implies pretty strongly that the suffering of children comes from Federation history, which, of course, would directly apply to the history of Earth. Suffering in the Federation in the 23rd century might be at a minimum. But the history of how Star Trek's rosy figure got to the point comes from our own painful present. Written by Ryan Britt. Ryan Britt is a longtime contributor to Den of Geek. He is the author of the forthcoming book Phasers on Stun. How the Making and Remaking. Read more from Ryan Britt.
If